Gary. Thank you, and I'd like to recall the planning commission to order.
Hear the volume go up.
We were told it worked very well.
It's like there could be a problem. I don't know why you have to use it.
Then fixed it all.
Can everyone please rise to the pledge of allegiance and remain standing for the moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
Chairman, should, there's quite a few people here, should we add a short public comment period either at the beginning or the end of the meeting?
I don't know how we guarantee short, but
You've got that camera.
does anyone else have any comments about it?
I don't believe it was advertised as
No one has any other changes. I would make a motion that we approve the agenda with the amendment to add a public comment period at the beginning before item C, joint work session.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion.
Can we limit those comments to 3 minutes so that the board, so we can have enough time to do our work here?
Absolutely.
Can we have the county administrator act as timer?
Can't access it on the board docs, but I'll.
Any other comments? Motion made and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Next item is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, simply raise your hand to be recognized. State your name, the district that you're from. And I'll open the comment section now. Yes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jennifer Matthews, and I'm from Wakefield District, and I'm here to inquire or urge you all to come up with federal standards and comments about the comprehensive plan, and even as we move forward, about the cell towers of communication systems and so forth, because it just does not seem like it's a unified system. I understand there's 2 towers to the south of the county that have been built, but they have no vendors, so there's no service coming off of those towers. That's my understanding. I'm not certain if that's true. And so I think that there needs to be an independent expert company come in and review what we have, because I believe that even for small rural counties, there are other options out there for technology and getting the opinion of one vendor who's building the tower to tell us what's available may not be the best way to go about with a business plan. So I do urge you all to look at that carefully and add more wording in a larger section in the comprehensive plan for that. In Europe, they have smaller towers and maybe a few more towers, but then they're not problematic when you're looking at the view shed and the business.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Yes.
Phil Irwin, Flint Hill. I would like to once again suggest that the wording be included in the comprehensive plan that makes this county proactive as far as legislation that's passing through the General Assembly. Because every time the General Assembly meets, we lose some prerogatives in local government. Please put some wording in the comprehensive plan that we are looking out for our rights as local form of government.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Yes.
Hi, Sheila Bressinger, Hampton District. I want to commend the Planning Commission for working as hard as they have. I think it's very important to bring this to a specific conclusion. It's being adapted every 5 years, and I think it's taken quite a while to get it to this point finally. And I think going forward, we'll then be able to go to the next 5 years. I just want to say I think that would be just an appropriate way to handle this thing. I think we're close to the public hearing at this point, and I think we should just get on with it.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. David Connick from Stonewall District. I want to second what Ms. Matthews said about the cell towers, and also what Mr. Irwin said about putting something in the last two chapters about watching the legislation. But the main thing that I would like to address to the entire group is that this comprehensive plan in its present form is basically just a warmed over version of the 1980 plan. It's 30 years behind the times, or 35 years behind the times. You know, the numerous comments were made about the cell towers, and in their August meeting, they took the draft that everybody rejected or said wasn't ready back in January, and they've stricken anything about wireless from the comprehensive plan. All it talks about is broadband. And so that's just indicative. I sent the Planning Commission members and some other people on the board copies of what Fauquier has adopted. Fauquier, just on wireless, has a 22-page chapter complete with maps and criteria of how to approve, how to evaluate. We have nothing to protect the people. The same thing goes for farming. The farming statistics were updated, wonderful. They show a 30, 40, 50% decline in forestry and all different types of agriculture and harvesting and so forth, cattle and everything. What discussion has the Planning Commission had about what we should do? None. Not a word. The Berkeley group sent you a letter. They pointed this out about fire and rescue and about this and about various topics. I'm not going to go through them all, where you highlight problems in the comprehensive plan, but in the future plans, which PS has no maps of future development, so when Eldon comes in and moves to rezone, you have no way to stop it. There's nothing in the implementation plan about how any of this is going to get done, and it needs to be done. There's nothing in the implementation plan about how to boost or achieve the goals that are so beautifully set out, and everybody's nitpicking this word or that word in the goals. How are you going to do it? That chapter is blank. Not only it's blank, it says the exact same thing it said in 1980. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment? Yes.
Page Glenn, Jackson District. One of our main goals is agriculture. You all realize that the ordinance does not have food production as an allowable use of property, that means the chutney place has to have some sort of special exception, or whatever you want to call it. Same as Adams. You know, if we really believe in agriculture, we couldn't legally put a food hub in this county for our zoning ordinance. Just a thought. This is an example of one thing where the ordinances do not align with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Yes, Sheila,
Since everybody's had their chance to speak, we get a second opportunity.
you are correct.
Okay, I forgot to say one thing. The important thing that we want to do is, and what Mr. Light had said at one time, is that he wanted to get the current comprehensive plan completed so it would comply with the Virginia code, and then also they can get on to their other work, which is zoning. The comprehensive plan is supposed to be a generalized picture of how we're going to accomplish things, and it's up to various zoning to be brought up to date, and apparently there's a lot of work that needs to be done with that, but that's how we'll accomplish the rest of the stuff that's been discussed this evening, in my opinion.
Probably what we're gonna be discussing since this is a joint meeting.
Pardon me?
That's kind of really why we're here, to discuss that.
Good.
Anyone else care to speak? Anyone else? Declare public comment closed.
I apologize if the mics aren't working quite right. We may get Jimmy to fix that when he comes back in a few minutes. But my goal for having this joint meeting tonight was really an opportunity for dialogue between the planning commissioners and the board, and to cut to the end of the line to make sure that whatever comes out of the planning commission through the planning commission's public hearing and is recommended ultimately to the board is not dead on arrival because of factors that are important to the Board of Supervisors, but were not apparent to the planning commission. So I don't expect decisions to be made tonight. I would hope that it's an open exchange of information between the members of both bodies as we are now able to walk through the document prepared by the Berkeley group. It can help frame discussion. It doesn't have to constrain discussion, but it can frame discussion. And then leaving this meeting, hopefully the Planning Commission will have a better idea of their next steps that need to be taken before setting a document and authorizing it to be advertised for public hearing. With that said, with us here tonight is Darren Coffey with the Berkeley Group. You'll note that the memo was authored by Todd Gordon, and Darren is one of the principals of the companies here with us tonight. Todd has moved on to other colored pastures. I'm not sure what they are, but I'll allow Darren to introduce himself, and I'll pull up a short presentation he's put together to help guide the conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Darren Coffey with the Berkeley Group. I've been a public sector planner for 18 years prior to doing consulting for local governments, which I've been doing for about 10 years. And there was some years of overlap where I was doing both here and there. So I've got about 25 years of local government land use planning experience. Comprehensive planning is one of my favorite things to do. Zoning is one of the most important things to do, but it's not as exciting as comprehensive planning, but it's every bit as important. The comprehensive plan is your policy guide as the Board of Supervisors and your land use policy guide as the Planning Commission for decisions to be made regarding land use, transportation, and anything else that you deem is appropriate to put in the comprehensive plan. Some of the things that were mentioned during public comment perfectly appropriate to include in the comprehensive plan. So what Mr. Gordon did was he went through and evaluated the comprehensive plan as drafted. I put together a very short presentation that summarizes the memorandum that I think each of you have. I'd like to go through that presentation just kind of as a summary and an overview, and then we can go back to the beginning and use that to help us walk through the discussion, if that sounds okay. I also, on the last slide, added some of my observations, because I hadn't looked at it before, and so I was trying to catch up with where Todd was, and as always, he did a very excellent job. But, I have my lens too, and so I just had a few broad thoughts that I'll conclude. So we were asked by the county administrator to focus on two major things. Basically, review the comprehensive plan with regard to compliance with the Code of Virginia, which we're very accustomed to doing in localities throughout the Commonwealth. And then also construct what comprehensive plans, how can we make a comprehensive plan, how can you consider making a comprehensive plan a more useful tool for you, more clear, concise, creating a message that's understood, etc. And so I would say that none of the comments that we made are earth-shattering. Hopefully you find them to be useful. If they're not useful for this exercise, maybe they'll be useful down the road. And so we'll begin with the first part, which is the Code of Virginia compliance. So we put together basically a chart, all the required elements. There's about 20 required elements. Just count them up in the Code of Virginia, the various sections of the code. The ones in red are the ones where a few tweaks need to be made to really be fully in compliance with the Code of Virginia. Understand there are no comprehensive plan police in Virginia. So nobody's going to come knocking on your door saying, "Oh gosh, I can't believe you didn't do this correctly." But it does enable things to be done, and when it says shall, it means you will. And when it says may, it means you can, but don't have to. So these are all kind of shall. Comprehensive plan is reviewed every 5 years, and a schedule or acknowledgement of that section of the code, which I think is 2230. It should be incorporated kind of usually in the purpose of the plan up front section. Really easy to do, not the end of the world if it's not there. But I think that, to me, the important part is that you are reviewing it every 5 years, and you're setting forth that expectation for yourselves as the Planning Commission, as the stewards of the comprehensive plan, that you're going to review it every 5 years and ensure that it remains in compliance with the code and with the public sentiment and vision as we move forward. The other one is the process to amend the plan. This is very, very important. A lot of people will revise their comp plan, whatever, every 10 years. They'll look at it at 5 and say it looks fine. They revise it after 10, and they don't touch it again, right?
Yes.
You should amend it as needed and or annually. It should be a living, breathing document that you, as the elected and appointed leaders, are using to guide your decisions on a monthly basis. And then every 12 months, you should be saying, what amendments do we need to make? It doesn't have to be nearly the rigorous exercise that a 5 or 10-year review is, but if you do it annually, then you're not having as rigorous of an exercise after it's 5 years. And so including the process and procedures for citizens to apply for changes, that's important. If somebody wants to petition the Planning Commission to the board for rezoning, and they want to lay the groundwork for that rezoning, that should be done ideally in a comprehensive plan, which we'll talk about right now, actually. So requirements for future growth, address the impacts of growth scenarios with forecasting the number of residential units. So you talk about growth, but you don't go to the level of detail that ideally you would go to in terms of what does that mean? What does that growth mean in terms of an impact to the community? And then affordable housing. The words are in there, but it doesn't really do anything to talk about it, promote it, discuss the issue in terms of variety of housing, the cost of housing relative to low moderate income, and what that level is in Rappahannock County. And so including some data to address the costs as a percent of income, just having a little bit more of a robust discussion about affordable housing is something that we typically see. Some communities go to the nth degree, others barely address it at all. We're saying that the words are there, but really the spirit and intent of the code section that that has really been good. In other recommendations, I'm going to talk about a future land use map in a minute. I'm going to come back to that. If you don't have one that I could detect, it's really something that I think the code requires. Probably should have been in the previous slide or the chart. It's something that if the developer wanted to amend something in preparation for rezoning, or if the planning commission board wanted to amend, what you're amending is a future land use map and saying this is our vision, and any proposal that comes in needs to comply with that vision. If it doesn't, the rezoning should be done. So some of the other recommendations is provide more detail about the methods used for public input. So in 2016, apparently there was some effort to gather public input and listen to what the citizens had to say. And what the suggestion is here is that that should be a major driver of a comprehensive plan effort. And so if there could even be an appendix to this plan that documents what was said in 2016, that helps with the credibility of what this plan is saying and what it's recommending. Provide the most accurate citation of statistics. So again, you basically have census data and you have American Community Survey data. American Community Survey data, estimates derived from census data, and then there's the census data. So we're basically just saying source it. There are statistics that are given, and they're not always sourced. They need to be sourced appropriately. Also provide the applicable year instead of citing current estimates as of when. 16, 19, 18. 3 years from now, you're not going to know current estimates when. So just again, appropriate sourcing of data. And then using specific language to describe and address problems. So one issue was actually brought up this evening. The fire and rescue was impacted by communication challenges. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that you don't have cellular? I mean, I got no signal. I got Verizon, I got no signal. I'm at the high school, I got no signal. Radio, is it public safety radio communication? What does it mean and what needs to be done to address the issue? So I think that doesn't occur a lot in the plan, but the plan is very descriptive. And I'll talk about that some more in a minute, but it's not very prescriptive. What are we going to do about this thing? And again, as the policy guide, that's your number one tool, that's your number one friend, that if you develop it correctly, it'll help lay out that trail for how to get it done and implemented. And then broadband internet service is addressed, but also consider addressing cellular telephone coverage. I was thinking as I was driving here, which I'm in Louisa, pretty much a straight shot up 231. One of the most beautiful drives, probably anywhere in the country, but certainly in Virginia. So the drive home is not nearly as pretty as it's done. Now I was thinking about, if you haven't looked at what Orange County is doing, you should take a look at that in terms of, it's under the umbrella of public safety communications. You know, the driver is basically, our deputies are out there and they can't talk to one another. They go into dark areas, radio silence dark areas. It's not safe. We need a better public safety communication system. Oh, by the way, when we do that, we're going to address our cellular coverage and we're going to address our broadband internet. We're going to connect fiber to the towers, we're going to connect fiber to the schools, we're going to connect fiber to other strategic locations throughout the county. We're going to use federal public safety dollars to do it, along with local dollars. And we're doing it all under the rubric of public safety, but we're doing healthcare, telework, education, all of these things are being addressed. I don't want to belabor the point, but if we didn't have these lights on, we were sitting in the dark, it'd be a different meeting. Broadband and high-speed internet is the electricity of the 21st century. Whether you're urban, whether you're rural, it doesn't matter where you're at, it is the electricity for the 21st century. And your comp plan can lay that out. So again, some other recommendations. The plan does a really good job of presenting data and pointing out trends. But what do those trends mean? What's the to what end? So this is what's happening in the county. So what does that mean for us? How might it impact the community? What might be done if a correction needs to be made to those patterns, or at least an acknowledgement of it. And then again, the draft plan directs residential densities to specific areas, uses terms like low density and ag, medium density, and identified growth planted areas. What does that mean? You mean 1 unit per 10 acres is low density, 1 unit per 5 acres is low density? What's medium density? Is that 4 units per acre, which would be quarter-acre lots? Is it 2 units per acre, half-acre lots? So, what do you mean, or maybe there's a range for what you mean, and how should that be defined in the comprehensive plan? And that lays the foundation for the zoning ordinance and how each zoning district then regulates density by law and by regulation. So, some future and current updates with regard to mapping. Again, the settlement areas, which are essentially your growth areas, identified would be appropriate for a little more density. The settlement areas, we don't have any boundaries. And so maybe that's by design, but usually in today's day and age, if you can have GIS maps, and your planning district commission is an excellent resource for GIS data, and they can do excellent mapping. But it might be a good exercise, maybe not as part of this comprehensive plan update, but maybe an amendment in 2020 or 2021 or whatever to do some small area plans, to look at these settlement areas, to define them a little more specifically, have public workshops in each area, ask those folks, where do you think your boundary should be? Usually makes for a really colorful conversation. I don't want to be in it. I do want to be in it. Including the future land use map to illustrate areas of potential development and reinforce the preferred zoning pattern. In the memorandum before you, Todd had indicated that you've chosen not to have a future land use plan. I don't know if that's the case or if it just was an omission. In my experience, it's a requirement of the code. It's something that is one of the most useful parts in terms of land use of a comprehensive plan, and you really should have a future land use map. That future land use map is not the same as the zoning map. The future land use map says this is the types of land uses we want and where we want it. The zoning says this is what the requirement is. And when you change your zoning map, you should be comparing it to the future land use map, and to the extent it's in conformance, the zoning change gets approved, all things equal. To the extent it doesn't, it gets denied. So it's a very useful tool, and it's something that, again, I think the Planning District Commission is well equipped to be able to help you and guide you through a process like that if that were desired. To have a new comprehensive plan and not have a future land use map, man, that's like, you've got the gun and you've got 1 bullet in it, but it'd be more useful if you put a couple more bullets in it. And then, the planning district has excellent mapping resources. Not to take money out of our pocket, because we're a consultant, we can do that too, but for local governments as a resource, you can't beat the support the planning district commission can do. These are my observations. This plan starts out and it says, here's the challenge. Okay, that's great, that's good. Where's the vision? I'd say let's flip the script. What's the vision? What did the public say in 2016? What values have been expressed to you as appointed and elected officials consistently throughout this process and outside of this process? If the only constant is change, which is what the challenge says, part of that, how do you want to guide that change? If it's going to change, Rappahannock County is going to change, how's it going to change? It can stay substantially similar in terms of its rural character, but it's going to change. So how is it going to change? It's very much a traditional style plan. This morning before I had my second coffee, I said it's an old style plan. It's very descriptive. It's 100-some pages. It describes the situation pretty well. It's very information heavy. A new style plan, what a lot of communities are turning to is just, we want to know what the direction is we're going in. We want to know what is our vision, what are the goals to support that vision, and what are the strategies, the actions, the discrete things we're going to do to achieve the goals which will implement the vision for the community. It's very implementation oriented, which doesn't mean it has an implementation section that says we're going to implement this. And then there's all these policies, and okay, there's one planner. So how are you going to implement it? You know, who's responsible for implementing it? You know, where's that roadmap for actually doing it over a 5, 10, 20-year period? And typically you're going to have those short-term strategies, which are within 5 years. You're going to have the medium term, which is beyond 5, maybe 5 to 10. And then you're going to have the long-term strategies, which are beyond a decade. And once you have a comp plan in place, ideally your capital improvement program feeds from that. And so what you said you want to do in the plan, you start to budget and plan for and fund through your CIP. And then in the annual budget, year one of that CIP is funded in the budget. And then each year things move up, and that's how you start implementing the comprehensive plan. So that's it for our observations. Like I said, you know, the house isn't burning down. It's a solid plan. It just needs a few tweaks to be, you know, fully compliant. But there are things that can be done that are much more substantive, that would take long periods of time. You know, there are resources out there to help you if you decide that you want to do it that way. I think you're to be commended for tackling this yourselves. It's a hard thing to do when, you know, you're putting out fires all day long, and you're handling the development applications that are coming in, and you're just doing the routine business, which is significant for being a commissioner, being a supervisor, being a public official. And so to do a long-term project of this magnitude is just tough. It takes a lot of evening hours when you're not meetings, and I think you're to be commended for that. I'm here as a resource. We can go back and walk through this. I'll answer any questions or take any punishment you might have to be out, and we'll just here as resource.
Did we have any questions or comments from the board?
Might be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we started at one end of the table and each one of us had expressed our views on this. That way we can have a consensus of feel in the board.
Well, let's start on your end, Chris.
Very good. I happen to completely agree with what has been articulated, but I think we need to look at our plan and our future from what I would call a strategic standpoint, as opposed to a tactical standpoint. Tactics deal with individual problems and their resolution. Strategy is where are we going and how do we get there? And I think that we basically have an attitude problem in that Rappahannock County has mostly been backward-looking, and it wanted to stay the same and not be despoiled and developed the way so much of the rest of the state has been. And in that way, it has been very effective, and that has been a huge success, but it's a success only as far as it is kind of has been a delaying tactic and a rearguard action. And I think what is necessary to go forward is an idea of where do we want to end up and how do we want to get there, because I think there are several very critical developments or processes happening in our community. We're getting older, there are fewer families and children, and I think we bode to have problems with the fire department, as we already have, and the schools, as the population being maintained as a viable, so that the schools can be a viable entity. And in my estimation, a county without schools is a county without a soul and without a purpose. And to deal with this, I think that a consensus needs to be arrived at that we do need to develop ourselves to encourage future possibility in terms of a vibrant and active population. But I think we also need to redefine some of our institutions, and in my opinion, the Planning Commission is one. I think that we are spending much too much time dealing with basically unimportant details, special use permits, special exception permits, that kind of thing, which are quite reasonably accomplished by the zoning administrator and the Board of Zoning Appeals. And we are not dealing with the planning on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So what I would propose is that the Planning Commission devote itself to planning as a part of its weekly or monthly meetings, and they be defined in particular so that, say, affordable housing will be discussed. Some meetings, the plan and mapping of the land uses will be discussed. And I think the beauty of reorganizing ourselves this way is that instead of having to have a kind of all-night push to get things done, it will be done on a regular basis that is understood and more relative to what the general population wants and cares about. Thank you.
Thank you. I also appreciate the feedback and the input. I do have a couple of questions about some of the particulars, notably the question about the future land use map. I believe we do have that overlay area identified. It's been a challenge because it's not been well identified, but part of the challenge is we don't have many areas that we're trying to encourage development, so you may be looking for things that don't exist.
So future land use map would show the entire county and would identify areas where, agricultural use and areas where there are commercial or business uses, where you envision them to be in the future.
But my point is, we have a map showing the villages. We say that we encourage development in the villages, and the only place we're encouraging commercial development is along the corridor. So in my view, I understand that our way of presenting it may be unconventional, but I think it's appropriate for this our level of county and plan. I think the information is there. Perhaps it could be tied together a bit better. But I think the question about whether we've addressed future land use, I think is a question of presentation. I do think it's in there. My other comment is, we talk a lot about how Rappahannock is different, how our plan needs to reflect our uniqueness. And, we usually talk about that in the content of our scenic nature and our wonderful unmatched views. But there's another dimension to that, and that is that we're 7,000 people. We have relatively low taxes, and we don't like the government getting in the way of what we're generally doing. And, while we might be able to cut and paste from Fauquier or Orange County's comprehensive plan, we can't cut and paste from their budget or from their staff. And so, in my view, the notion that we need a more proactive discussion of how we're going to implement the plan is inconsistent with the vision that is presented in the plan, which is that we still don't really want to change that much in general. There may be, Mr. Byrd referred to this as sort of past thinking. I think it represents current thinking. We have agricultural areas. We'd like to encourage them. We believe in people's right to use their property as they see fit. We believe in the market to present where there are opportunities for people to build and invest. And we don't have, nor do we particularly want, in my estimation, a larger planning budget and a larger tax base and a larger, government presence that would be required to adopt some of the recommendations that are being held. So my point is, in addition to our views, I think I would take exception to the notion that some of these items are somehow oversights or omissions, and instead I would suggest that they absolutely reflect what is part of the uniqueness and vision of this county. With respect to some of the other particular items, it's hard to argue that, better maps, better references to data, better, clarity of some of these visions wouldn't be improvements. I totally agree that we should, add some of the items on the checklist. I don't agree that we need much on the territorial requirements for future growth, because it's very hard to use any kind of data and forecast any sort of growth. We have had I personally was involved in a capacity build-out plan done in 2001. And we looked at a variety of scenarios and found that by right population absorption capacity in Rappahannock County is about 20,000. So maybe we should dust off some of that information. It's a little tricky to rely on something from 2001, but if anything, I think the trajectories that were envisioned at that time have actually not materialized, and we've seen less growth and less development than we thought we might at that time. So I guess my broader point is, when you compare our comprehensive plan to that of other counties, I think it's very easy to overlook some of those unique and valuable things about Rappahannock County above and beyond our view sheds, which are of course spectacular, but we also, I think, pride ourselves in a light touch and a fairly unobtrusive government presence. And I think that should continue to be reflected in the plan as it is. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate the presentation and I appreciate the public input. So maybe I just better start with public input and some feedback on that. I agree that we need to go very cautiously with the cell service, the cell towers. But I do not agree that we need to hire any outside help. A few years ago, we hired a company from Connecticut to look at our fire and rescue situation, which seemed like a good idea, but paid $30-some thousand for their advice, and they ended up with the advice of change our zoning ordinance to allow development so we'd have more volunteers. And that was it. And we really, everybody I talked to really does not want to develop Rappahannock County. And furthermore, taking that advice, if we did, we'd probably have to go to the paid department anyway because of the population. But at any rate, we have, this is a right, farming is important. Agriculture is extremely important in this county, but you have a bunch of large landowners that are, many of which are not making a profit, and they're sitting on a lot of equity. But they love their lifestyle and they're not going to give it up as long as they're living. And something like land use obviously helps a lot, but it's just the fact that this is the right to farm area. You can grow anything you want, and you can set up a stand right on the road in front of your farm, sell whatever you grow. And so that, in a way, is, as far as I know, about all we can do, other than create some kind of co-op where it's like they have, I think, in Harrisonburg, where it's covered or whatever. But that's kind of not what we're talking about now. I agree with Gary. We have a zoning map. We don't see much of it. We have two areas: conservation, agriculture, and then we have areas that are, you know, within the villages and in certain intersections that, you know, are like 1 acre zoning, 5 acre zoning. And what we do have the advantage of having a lot of land in conservation easement here, over 20% of the private land. But a lot of those 5 acre zoning lots got snapped up into conservation easements because the landowner would give up the division rights, get tax credits, sell them, put some money in the pocket, you know, and keep going. So that's kind of what happened there. Some of our intersections that we had that's on the map for more intensive housing has been erased as a result of that. We have what we have now because of the existing, in my opinion, because of the existing comprehensive plan that we have now. So we probably don't want to change it much. We have to, you know, address these issues that are required, obviously. But and as this gentleman pointed out, there is no comprehensive plan police. So, you know, I've stated before, and I've got a lot of grief for it. There's not a single law in the state of Virginia that requires us to follow the comprehensive plan. It is a plan, and we do use it to create our zoning ordinance, which is enforceable by law. So that's the advantage there. And yeah, you all probably get the idea that I'm leaning toward the idea that we should move forward and go ahead and have a public hearing. If there's anything that comes out of that, we can, you know, the planning commission can tweak that. But we've been, you know, kicking this down the road long enough. This thing about GIS has been coming up. I personally have been opposing the idea of GIS all I can. The reason is it's really difficult to develop this county without the GIS. I look over at Culpeper and Fauquier and I see these huge developments come in. They're from these companies out of Texas, California, Ryan Homes, etc. They can sit anywhere in the U.S. with a computer. If the county has GIS, they can develop it on paper, and then they come to the county and all their work is done. Like we have it set up, those poor suckers, they gotta fly and drive to go to Washington and go to the clerk's office and dig through all that material to develop this county. So I know that sooner or later, you know, we're probably going to be forced to have the GIS as much as anything for the fire and rescue. I think as long as we can put it off, the better. Like I say, everybody, I talked about the public input. You know, I almost never, really, literally never run across anybody that wants to actually develop this county. We have not much traffic, we have peace and quiet, we have dark skies, and we have all of that without the advantages that our neighbors have, who basically have the same tax rate we have, basically. We're all within pennies of each other. And yet, their composite index is way lower. We're paying 80%. These counties are paying way lower, so we're paying way more for education. They have all these stores where they're collecting sales tax. They have all these other places for like real estate tax, like with this, you know, these big, whatever they are, box stores, etc. We don't have that, and yet, just from paying our bills from the real estate taxes on our houses, we're doing fine. We have a terrific school system and a great, you know, police force, and we have, you know, pretty much all of that without this outside income. And tourism, all by itself, is through word of mouth, is doubled. The income we get from tourism has doubled in the 10 years that I've been on the board, and that's without the county paying for it, paying to promote it. You know, and I can tell you now that my neighbors around Castleton, they are not interested in, you know, paying to promote the people up in Sperryville with, you know, to, you know, anyway, it's another issue. Yeah, I think as far as the school population goes, I think that's gonna reverse anyway. I mean, we almost got a big influx of students when Wakefield almost closed. And this school is almost like, a private school. And I know that when people look for a community to move into, young couples, the first thing they look at is the school system. And so I think that, we're gonna be attracting, more young families in the near future. So, yeah, I think that's about it. The affordable housing is a sticky issue. We have a lot of cheap rental houses already. I know that we looked at affordable housing with People Inc., and they did the thing in Sperryville that it turned out that the income level was just outside the reach of the teachers and the deputies, and the affordable housing was going to end up being $1,400 a month. And that's not what most of our citizens consider to be affordable, because there's a whole many. I think the average rent is $1,000 or less a month in the county. So anyway, I think that's pretty much covers what I was going to say, and I don't see any harm in tweaking just a little with the planning commission, tweak a little bit, and to go ahead and put it up for public hearing, and that way the rest of the public can come out and put their input in, and if there's any tweaks to be made, we can do it. And if we go down the road a year or two, we don't like it, as the man said, we don't have to wait 5 years. We can tweak it anytime. So thank you.
As the newest member of the Planning Commission, although not necessarily the newest member of Rappahannock County, I found it very helpful to have the Berkeley group give this analysis, and thank you for that. I guess I was very gratified to hear that you think as a general matter, it's actually a pretty solid plan, and we all know there are tweaks we could do to it, but as it stands now, it's not a disaster. It meets a lot of the requirements as it is, with maybe a few tweaks. I understand that's not to say it does everything that we necessarily want it to do, or that over time we may make it do. As you point out, change is a constant, and I think what we need to do is make sure that the changes that are occurring around us aren't going to make changes happen in our county that we don't want to happen. We want to preserve something that's utterly unique that we have here. I know I hear many people say, gosh, I wish I had this service, or I wish I had that service, but in this very same breath, they'll say, but I was driving down so-and-so and I saw this view that looked like it came out of the 1700s, and this is the most important thing in the world. So I think all of our job is to balance what we want. I don't doubt that we can have every service known to mankind here in Rappahannock County, but what we can't have is every service known to mankind and our beautiful scenic way of life. And so that's our job, is to use all our great minds that we have here in this county, I think, to figure out how to keep what we are stewards of while maximizing the benefits we can, and not risking what we have that nobody else has. I think that to do a plan that does all the things that the Berkeley group has suggested is not an overnight task. It's something that would have to take some careful thought. I think, again, coming as somewhat new to the Planning Commission, just as a citizen of Rappahannock, my first goal would be to do no harm to whatever changes we put into the plan, were changes that we knew were sensible, were good, we're going to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And sometimes that does take some time and some comparison to other jurisdictions. It's not to say that we want to adopt wholesale what other jurisdictions have done, but they certainly can be an educational tool for us and something to consider. I think that the one thing we can be sure of is that if we use the same exact tools that are used in Vernon or Gainesville or Arlington, then we will quickly become Vernon or Gainesville or Arlington. So again, our job is to make a comprehensive plan, amend our ordinances in a way that is unique to Rappahannock County. So that's, I don't know where that takes us quite, but that's my goal.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Berkeley Group for your excellent presentation this evening, and also for Todd's former visit. That was very instructive, and also for the original checklist that was supplied that showed the shortcomings of the plan and what we needed to work on. Having spent almost the last year with 1 foot in on the Board of Supervisors and 1 foot serving as the board's representative on the Planning Commission, it's been invaluable information to guide us on both bodies in the past year. So thank you very much. In looking at the original checklist that the Berkeley Group had prepared on the comprehensive plan, I think we were about 50% short on what was required to meet the state code for comprehensive plans. There was quite a bit of work to do. About half of the things were unchecked, and now we're at the point where it's 20 to 25% of the things on the list are unchecked or require additional work. So I think there has been a lot of good progress made in the last 10 months. What I think the challenge is, and what I think Mr. Bird hit on, is the ability of the Planning Commission to balance the planning, in particular the comprehensive plan, at this time, with all of the other functions that they have to perform, because that is the way the county code is constructed, that those items go to the Planning Commission. So what is the path forward, especially since we have these 2 ambitious tower applications that we have to get through in the next few months, that allow us to do that work and also do this work? I will say that I believe the work on the comprehensive plan is more urgent now than ever in light of the recently announced sale of the Eldon property, not sale, but it's being put up for sale, of the Eldon farm, and also with the cell tower applications. It is clear that we need to be more prescriptive in our comprehensive plan for these particular kinds of items, so that when these situations arise, we aren't being reactionary. We have it written up and we do what it says. So I admit that I also wish there were more community buy-in for the comprehensive plan. I don't feel like some of the other bodies, like the BZA, that have given us feedback, I don't feel like that has ever really been acknowledged. I believe that the feedback that was given to us by UCOR has never really been acknowledged. I'm concerned that some of the citizens' concerns haven't been addressed completely. And I think that the sooner we can get this done and get it done correctly, the better. And we cannot sacrifice either of those points. It has to be done, and it has to be done correctly. I believe, I've been thinking about it quite a bit the last few weeks, and I firmly believe that what we should do is put together a special organization, call it what you want, task force, blue ribbon panel, subcommittee, steering committee, draw in 2 members of the BZA, 1 or 2 members of the Board of Supervisors, 2 members of the Planning Commission, and 2 or 3 members of the general public, and work with these recommendations to get this completed. Because with everything else that we have going on, it is very difficult to undertake this additional planning work. The focus of this committee would be strictly the comprehensive plan. And it would be a deadline-oriented committee that would do the work. I don't see any other way to get it done in the next 6 months. I do not believe the planning commission will get it done. And I don't say that to find fault. I find that simply after having served on the committee for 10 months. But I don't think that's a realistic timeline. I don't have any questions. I'm very encouraged that we've been able to make so much progress. In the same token, I believe that I'm speaking for my constituents when I say this plan urgently needs to be done, and we need to find a way forward for it. Thank you.
I appreciate the Berkeley Group's work. I really do. It's been sorely needed. So thank you. I appreciate all the people that come to these meetings and make comments and give feedback. I really appreciate the fact that the Board of Supervisors owned up $5,000 so that we could get some help, because it is needed. This is not something that an appointed board of volunteers necessarily has all the acumen available to write a comprehensive plan. I think we were very fortunate that 50 years ago we had some forward-thinking people who wrote a plan and worked on zoning and gave us something that was really has saved this county from all the encroachment that we see further east. We're lucky that we don't have a highway that barrels through here with, when it goes east-west, has to get over the mountains. There's not a lot of pressure coming from the west. We're fortunate that it's a dead-end community in a way for the highway. 522 is not an easy route for anybody to get anywhere. They're going to go 66, 81, or somewhere else, 29. We've been very lucky, just the grace of God, that we have this highway system. That said, we have some very significant pressures coming. And we may think that we don't have GIS here, but we do. There's an overlay program out there that is in the realtor's site. It's simple. You can find almost any large property you want to find. And you can see the basic property lines, the roads. It's all there. We're not hiding in plain sight anymore. Actually, I guess we are hiding in plain sight right now because it's there. The thought that we do need, I think, a future land use map. And I think that the map that we have that is the zoning map, which has the lines showing this is the agricultural zone, this is the conservation zone, perhaps that should be part of our plan as a way of defining those growth areas. That puts it right there, makes it part of the plan, makes it defensive. I'm concerned that the plan does need to be proactive, and if it's not, I think we're going to have a problem. I think that there's no law that says that our plan has to be anything more than the basics, but there's plenty of lawsuits that might say that, and I think we can't take the risk of being sued for not having an adequate plan. That said, again, we are volunteers. We're not a bunch of lawyers. We're not a bunch of planners. In certain fact, we're not a planning company. We are people that are doing the best we can to try to protect the county. Strategy versus tactical, as Chris said, is very important. We really need to have both. The school shrinkage, it might be an opportunity that it makes so we can make our schools better. I don't see the schools growing anytime soon. without having adequate internet, adequate cell service. I'm a realtor, people come here, they can't get, they're living like this, and they go, I can't live here. I've got to have service. I've got to have good internet. I can't have a business here. I've got to have internet. It's a serious problem, and yet I've always in the past thought that you move to the country to be in the country. Why are we all here? Because we love being here, because it's the country. We don't want it to be the city. I used to say, if you get hurt out here in the country, well, you came out here and you knew you didn't have, cell service, you bought a house here, you lived here, that's what it is. But as, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Darren said, internet and cell service are like the electricity of the past. The rural electrification came, everybody wanted it. Cell service came, everybody wanted it. We've got issues in trying to provide that and still maintain what we have. I think we need, we have a couple of things. First of all, we need, I believe, a plan that meets current standards of having a plan in place so that we, at a minimum, have a plan in place in case there is a lawsuit or if there is a development or something comes along and we need to react. We've got to, we can't have a say, well, your plan is not actually a plan, it doesn't meet standards, and have it thrown out. So we need a plan. We need to pass a plan, and I think relatively quickly, even if it's just slightly modified from what we have, to have it in place. I think that we need to be planning every year, as it's been said, because we can't wait 5 years. We should be reworking this plan or working on parts of this plan constantly. And I do think we need some professional help. I do think that it's a worthwhile expense to protect the county to have some professional help behind us on this. I don't think we can, as Christine said, I don't believe we can just do this on our own very easily, even if we put together a blue ribbon panel. I'm still not sure we have the expertise to write or rewrite the entire plan. I think we can move forward from where we are. I think we can do it slowly and keep changing parts. But I do think we need to spend some money on having some help, revise this plan, get this plan in place, work on revising it, and within the next year, hopefully have a new plan that we can continue with. So that's my opinion on that. The do no harm, I believe, but harm is out there. It will be coming. And we've got to be proactive, or we're going to see what we really love go away. People, we all came out here, we all love the views of the mountains. I think that there's a lot of people who will be coming out here in the future who will want a view from the mountain. And you're going to see more and more pressure to develop the mountains, and to get up top, look down over everything else, and it's going to spoil it for everybody else. And I think that's a serious issue that we need to confront. I think adding some more maps, I think we should have a map of Sperryville as a designated growth area, even if it's just to take the current map that has the current zoning until it gets out to agricultural. That's the generalized map of Sperryville. You have Lower Washington is already mapped. Other communities are pretty small and not very easy to, Woodville is very tiny, but you've got a map of Woodville. It shows where the boundaries are. And then we can decide if those boundaries need to be extended, or if somebody comes in for a rezoning, they can't just say, well, there's nothing really shows where these boundaries are. So I'm for that. What's my for? I don't know. I'm for I'm a conservative guy, but I know that if you don't plan, somebody else will plan for you. So we really need to be careful here. I think it's been a long time since the plan has been rewritten. It's a big job to rewrite the whole plan. And I think we've had a lot of good input. I would like to see us use some outside help, fund some more help, and really, but this plan we have, make some adaptations to make it current, and legal and meeting state statute, and then move forward from there.
Ms. McInnes, I'd also like to thank,
Get the mic.
I'd also like to thank Representative Mitchell Berkeley for the presentation he made and what Michelle did earlier. But I have to say that I disagree with a lot of what I've heard. And I can see why we have the plan that we have right now. One of the biggest problems I think we face, sorry about that. One of the biggest problems we face is that, I think this one is better, that about half of us up here on the Planning Commission Board of Supervisors have had no training. And that's unfortunate. The training's available, but we haven't went. And this build out that Mr. Light referred to earlier, had we not done any planning, that build out would have, that's who I know who I am. That build out would have basically destroyed agriculture and the view sheds in the county as we know them. It didn't happen for a variety of reasons. Probably the economy was one of the biggest. We need these maps. And when Mr. Parrish says that the code doesn't require us to use a plan, that's inaccurate, sir. Because when the Planning Commission makes decisions, the Board of Supervisors or the DZA makes decisions for special permits or special exceptions or rezoning, if somebody is turned down, and we say, well, because of our zoning maps, because of our planning and our comprehensive plan, we turned it down for this reason, that may be defensible in court. If we don't have that, if we've got things so out of whack that we can't point to that, we didn't make any findings, that we couldn't approve it for this reason, that reason, or this other reason, we've lost. And one of the things that kind of stuck with me when I took those training sessions periodically, Mike Chandler would say, if your locality is being sued for a land use decision, and you get up there and you say, I feel, or I think, or I believe, you may have just lost the case for your locality. Because zoning is black and white. It either complies or it doesn't. You can't say I feel. And too much of that is what we do here in this county, and it's based on personality. And we've got to get away from that. That's why we need the zoning maps, because with the future land use maps, we can say that we want to protect this area, therefore we're willing to allow this area to have some development in it. If we don't have a delineated area, we're going to have a mess. We're going to have happenstance, we're going to have personality-driven zoning, and frankly, I'm tired of it, both as a taxpayer and as a member of this board. I'm tired of personality-driven zoning. Zoning enforcement. And I think every one of us should be tired of that. But it sounds like we're not. Now, when I work on something, sometimes people wonder if I work on anything at all. But really, I try to keep this in mind. If we don't have time to do it right the first time, when are we going to find time to do it again later? And as far as tools, planning and zoning are our tools that we can use in this community to plot the path forward. I use the same tools on every job, whether it's rehabbing an old house or an old car or something more modern. It's the same tools. It depends on how you apply it. So yes, we can borrow something from another locality. That's exactly what our zoning ordinance is now. It's the Fauquier ordinance that had a few pages ripped out. The density was increased, and this board adopted in 1986. Will that plan work going forward? I don't know. But we've got to do something, and we're really kind of late getting started on this. And I'm afraid you think it's funny, but you have got some work to do, Mr. Wright.
I I chuckled because I'm sorry, I can't, we have to get started. I mean, I'm sorry, that is a.
Listen, I was on the planning commission in 2016, and we worked through those zoning amendments. And when I left, I think Mr. Lisinski went on behind me, and they just languished, they just disappeared. They were supposed to be, approved for public hearing. I think the exact motion was sometime in September. That September would have been 2 years ago.
I think
So I know I'm getting a little off course here. We're talking about the comprehensive plan, but we're talking about planning and zoning. Now, statutorily, the planning commission has to review certain things. They have to review site plans, so they are still going to have to keep working on special projects, special permit projects, whether special exception or special use permits. They have a requirement to look at these things. Unfortunately, just like our body, the planning commission may have to either use this task force type method, or maybe have 2 meetings a month like they do in other areas. If our workload is such that we can't get this done because we're working on this, then maybe we do this on Wednesday and we do this on the 3rd or 4th Wednesday, or whatever it takes till we get caught up. But to simply say that, hey, this might be good enough, let's get this done and then start working on it again, we're not going to do it because historically we haven't done that. We're not going to do that. We've proven it. We're not going to do it. So I think we need a plan going forward where we actually dig down whoever's going to be sitting here in the next couple of months, that we make the effort to get this work done. It's got to be done. And as far as the GIS, we're already implementing a CAD system for fire and rescue. It's computer-aided dispatch. So we're already doing GIS. We missed the boat by not piggybacking on that and doing the rest of our real estate. It seems like we're always a little bit behind. And I blame that on this board. That's not the planning commission's fault. This board should have made that decision. But if we want to continue to sit back and do nothing, sooner or later it's gonna come back to haunt us. And I think it's already doing that with these 2 cell towers. We don't have the proper zoning in place. We don't have the comprehensive plan in place. And we've got people knocking at the door. And I hate to rain on people's parade. I've been criticized. It was said in letters to the editor on these social media sites that Mr. Frazier threw the planning commission under the bus. It's my job to critique what the planning commission does because basically y'all work for us. And if I had employees not doing the job that I hired them to do, I'd have to say, hey, they're not doing the job I hired you to do. I don't care if you start here and you're working there, you start here and you work that way, but we've got to somehow get together and get this job and meet in the middle. We're not doing that. I don't understand what you find so funny, Mr. White.
I don't find it funny at all.
Then why do you keep laughing at me?
I'm bewildered, sir.
Well, if you're bewildered,
where you have been.
let's get started working on this and get it completed. Get these things in here that need to be done.
Sir, with all due respect, constructive criticism is one thing, but to comment that we need to go ahead and get started, we have been meeting multiple times a month. We have definitely.
But you didn't want to.
So what is?
6-8 months ago, you said the plan was ready. Then you started getting criticism. Somehow unilaterally, wait a minute, Mr. Chairman, somehow unilaterally, after the planning commission, wait a second, sir, I didn't interrupt you, I hadn't interrupted anybody. 6 months or so ago, y'all had voted on the planning commission to go forward with a public hearing. You got a bunch of static back from different groups, and you unilaterally pulled it out of the lineup to go to public hearing.
We got public input and we responded to it, sir.
No, you did. Somehow, I don't even know how you unilaterally did that, but nobody else complained about it, but that's not how it works either. you had been instructed by the planning commission for some reason to advertise it. Now, if you don't like what I'm saying, that's fine, but don't laugh at me.
Well, I'm not certain.
You did twice.
I
I was elected to do a job here, and I see myself doing that job.
I appreciate that. My request to you is to try to focus on what we need to do and less on criticizing those of us who are trying to do it. That's my only request, sir.
Well, that's fair, but we've got to get it done.
Thank you.
And as far as somebody interrupting me, I didn't interrupt anybody else. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to speak loudly. Phil, I'll try to speak loudly. I'm the 8th person to speak on this. Thank you. And so I think a lot has already been said, and I won't try to repeat it. Mr. Coffey, thank you. Thank you for the good work of the Berkeley group. I think it was money very well spent. I had 2 takeaways immediately from the presentation. One is that we're information heavy versus clear direction. In other words, we have something that's a little bit old school as opposed to what you're seeing in other counties that is more providing direction. In their comprehensive plan, we are, in that sense, descriptive and not prescriptive. And then I also think, picking up on Mr. Bird's analogy of tactical versus strategic, I think there are some tactical things that the Berkeley group defines and the Planning Commission has defined that can probably be done pretty quickly that are more data driven. For example, defining what we mean by low, medium, and high density development or density. And also, really, GIS. That's a purchase that the county could make. That kind of tactical because it could be resolved with an immediate action. And with respect to GIS, it is here already, and it's inhibiting us in areas like broadband, which, again, Mr. Coffey probably laid it out as well as anybody could have as far as how it is our 21st century rural electrification challenge and how it does cut across so many spectrums from education to healthcare, to telework, to the economy, not to mention entertainment. And so in order to have that, I think we are really finding as part of the Broadband Commission, which is really has a lot of citizen input, is that we can't take the next good step without GIS. And we're only one of 2 or 3 counties in the Commonwealth that still don't have it. The technology is such that we could have GIS but only show the public certain layers. In other words, if there was concerns about real estate development, there are certain items on the tax maps that would be perhaps available to government but not necessarily available to everyone. And I'll just leave it there because I'm not going to get into the transparency issue. I'm just making a technology comment. So there are ways to, I think, bring us into the 21st century there with GIS without necessarily compromising all of our data. We're disclosing all of our data. No, not advocating either way. That's for future boards to determine. With respect to strategic, I see things like I hear what Berkeley Group is saying about trends. We don't say what trends mean. We don't define. We see trends, but we don't define what those trends might mean for our future. And in glove with that, maybe is if a land use map. If in fact we don't have something that we feel is good enough, a future land use map is a strategic document that we really ought to have. Affordable housing, well, I think Berkeley Group defined that we need more data with respect to incomes and what that means with respect to affordable housing. We don't have that, and that's a tactical thing I think would be off the shelf that we could get. But also with respect to affordable housing, that's a strategic matter, and how we're going to handle that. We still have, I think of affordable more as a workforce housing issue, and how we can provide housing for teachers and other members of our community who can't necessarily afford the rents, or certainly can't afford the purchase. And so I would hope that a comprehensive plan would tackle that a little bit deeper. So the way I see it, just in wrapping up my brief comments, is we can either do the tactical things and get the data done and complete the comprehensive plan as it's been presented now, that we could approve, and then focus on the strategic elements of it later. And by later, it doesn't mean 5 years from now. We could do that in another year or 2 years. But at least we have something that we can use as we can say we've done it, and it's a jumping off point to getting those strategic elements in there in the next iteration. Or we could just do it all now, as I've heard from other members here too, to not only fill in the data that is missing, but also to focus on those trends, that future land use plan, and any other strategic matters that are just going to be so important to making this a clear vision and a clear direction for the county going forward and preserving what we have. So I'm really, I don't know if I have a final determination on how I feel about which direction to go in. But I do think one way or the other we're missing something in this plan in the form of these trends and some of these strategic elements that need to be included, if not now, certainly in the very near future.
Thank you. A lot has already been said tonight, and I can certainly do nothing more than add to it. I can't subtract from it. I just want to tell you a little story. I was born in 1946 in Rappahannock County. And I don't know if there's more than one or two people in this room who have been in Rappahannock longer than me. And when I grew up, I was on a farm, and I knew I wasn't going to be a farmer, so I left and went to school, went into the Navy, got married, raised a family, came back to Rappahannock. And in those 20-some years, there was very little change. Now, for some people, they may not like that, but I like no change. And sometimes I'm proud to say that we're still on the farm that my dad bought. But what I've heard here tonight is about this comprehensive plan, and I'm thinking we didn't really have a comprehensive plan back then. Just flew by the seat of your pants. But there's one thing I noticed is facts. Our comprehensive plan, now I've been reading this, it's full of facts. Fact after fact after fact. What it needs is more definition. But what Rappahannock also has is talent. We have people that can do miraculous things in this county, and we just can't seem to tap that energy when we need to. I want to thank Darren for being here tonight. Don't straighten me out on a few things. But I noticed something else about years ago was when we had fire and rescue. Everybody was a member of the fire department. Everyone. Police department, they had 3 people. 3 people. And there's less crime then than there is today. Land use. Land use is really the reason we're sitting here. Now, when I was 16 years old, I could get on my bicycle and ride from the south end of Flint Hill to the north end. That would have been 1964. This year, I can do the same thing. There's only 2 differences. 2 differences. Does anybody know what they are? The bank building and the post office. Now, there might be a house that's now a business, but the house is still no changes. So we got zoning and planning. And there's been some criticism here, but we certainly didn't need that because nobody's perfect. And I want to thank everyone for being with me all these years. I got 2 more meetings and I'm finished.
I think maybe we can find a couple extra cold meetings.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, do we want to hear from our 2 administrators while we're here? Do you all have any input?
I'll offer up, and I already leaned over and asked Michelle if she wanted to say anything. She said, I can go ahead and speak. And I don't know if that actually works. I have said before, I don't want perfect to be the enemy of acceptable. And I haven't been here for the last 10 years. I don't know if that has anything to do with why you have been editing the comprehensive plan pretty steadily since 2010, 12, and on into now. So I think we have to recognize that we do have a limited capacity in-house, and if we want to do a overhaul, that very likely does mean we're going to have to look out of county resources, volunteers, etc. And it will probably be a hybrid approach. And that may be needed regardless if we just want to upgrade what we have. I think, in general, your zoning and subdivision ordinance are critically important from a time-sensitive standpoint. And those need to be handled as quickly as possible. They're queued up. May amendments for whatever year, sign amendments, all of that really needs to get attention and then some. And not to mention subdivision ordinance, which is now at the forefront because you have large landowners that are considering selling, and people then look around and say, well, what does subdivision ordinance say? We don't use it ever. We just exempt everything because nobody ever wants to go through it. Preliminary plat and final plat. So I think those are critically important, and I am concerned, just as a newbie, only been here 2 years, that we will spend too much time trying to get the comp plan perfect, when the comp plan is a snapshot of time, and as we talked about, we can edit it today, we can edit it tomorrow. I just don't want it to put off the other items. To that end, I do think there are, all of you sitting here should be thinking about what are then the short, mid, and long-term modifications to the current plan that are important. And if you could bin items into those, whether they be more information in the comp plan on how we view vertical infrastructure, cell towers, to help protect us when those applications come in, that may be a short-term. And there's been some recommendations put forward based on what other localities do. Those are things that could probably be thrown in pretty easily. And then mid and long term, a future land use plan would be fantastic. Our future land use plan is in narrative form rather than graphic form. I think the graphic form would be good, but we don't even know what the county-wide zoning map looks like. You'd have to take the zoning map out of the book and paste all the sheets together, and nobody's ever seen it. It's piecemeal. So before you do a future land use plan, you'd have to really somehow get the zoning map out of those books and into some electronic form so that you can use as that template, which speaks to GIS, which I understand the hesitancy from a development standpoint, but there probably are ways that you can do it so that while information would be public and foiable, it wouldn't be readily accessible at somebody's fingertips. If they wanted, they'd have to buy it and then they'd load it into their own GIS. And then long term might be completely refreshing from the traditional model to a more modern, vision-driven model of the comp plan. Probably said more than I should because nobody elected me to be here. My job is always tenuous with whatever 3 or 5 people have to say. So. And I assume you still don't want to say anything.
For the very reason.
Yeah. She only has to worry about one person.
What about this concept of a task force made up of 2 people from each body that Ms. Smith represented? And working with the DD9 bank districts?
Well, so we worked with the regional commission to help upgrade the maps, and they do have some GIS capability that they can
They
help
have
us.
something that they use when we redistrict.
Yes.
So they have a pretty good capability.
They don't, of course, have any parcel data or any zoning information or anything like that. But I suppose they could. Who's the champion and how is it going to get done? And I know how many weekends were spent getting the comp plan where it is today from where it was when I showed up. So who's going to do that? And I don't know if a task force, if you find the right people, maybe.
My point in proposing a task force is that we have received a lot of input on the plan and haven't really allowed a lot of participation in working on it. And if we have willing individuals, which I think we do, to do the work for free, I think we ought to let them have a shot before we go spending money on a professional firm, which could always polish that product into its final form. I also did want to say that in my role as the supervisor's representative on the planning commission, when we reviewed the plan to see how much work it did need, I was the only advocate for doing a deep dive and for really addressing a lot of these items at that time. I was the only advocate for additional training and education. I was the only advocate for additional public engagement. I suggested we do more statistical analysis to draw our conclusions from and work more as a team. And when we made no headway with any of those items, that was when the Board of Supervisors saw fit to fund the working group to do the analysis, which I think is where we are today.
I think if we funded the analysis, it's been analyzed, and we can do something with it.
So obviously I'm involved in the budget. And I don't want to speak to the money side of things. One of the few things I understand being here in the county is perhaps the most important thing to the citizens is what we have in our community relative to land use and development or lack of development, etc. on viewshed. And so with that said, I would think the community would strongly support whatever's needed to do to protect that. I'm not, as you pointed out, I'm not saying that means hire a company and say, well, here's several $100,000 to give us a comp plan, because they're not us, right? It's more facilitation of a process. And
But I do think the citizens would be willing to support that if it's strategic.
If I can say something, it seems to me that we picked a date for a public hearing, like say, for example, in December. We had a deadline to, there's very little here that's left to do, it seems to me, and I see you're agreeing, thank you for that. And then have the public hearing, and if it goes well, then we can go ahead and pass it. If it doesn't, then we make some changes, go back to another public hearing. But we need to stop kicking the can down the road because, as you pointed out, we have these zoning issues to deal with, and it will be hard to do that before we complete the comprehensive plan. So first things first. So it's my suggestion that we have a public hearing in December. That gives them over a month to tweak whatever little tweaking we need to do here, and see how the public hearing goes, the planning commission, and then move on and go from there, so that beginning of next year we can tack down the issues, the amendments, etc., that's floating out there. That's truly going to protect this county. And just so everybody knows where I got the quote. The quote from that there is no law in the state of Virginia that requires us to abide by the comprehensive plan. That was from Mike Chandler at one of the supervisors' training sessions down in Virginia. So it is extremely important. I'm not trying to diminish it. It's extremely important. And so, but I do think it's time to move on so that we can address the zoning issues that truly are going to protect this county.
Mr. Parrish, I just wanted to respectfully point out that if we pass this in December, while we're also working on 2 cell tower applications, we will be leaving a complete lapse in the comprehensive plan because the proposed draft does not address cellular telephone coverage in the county at all. We can't adopt it until some work is done.
We can vote on cell towers or anything else. We can vote whenever we need to vote. And I didn't say we're going to pass it in December. I just said we'd have a public hearing.
Right, but then we'll be moving along simultaneously with the tower applications, which won't be done until the end of February at the latest.
May I ask, can we actually mark those applications in under what the current plan at this time?
Well, the current plan says we need to pay attention to our view shed. So, I mean, we do have issues that are in place.
You can't put a new plan in and say, I have to.
Well, that's true, but I think the point the Smith was trying to make is that we've got to get out ahead of these things because it's not going to be the last one. So we've got problems. We need to have the future land use maps. We really need this. That's not a maybe. I don't know how many times the gentleman mentioned we really need this. Mr. Curry has mentioned, and our zoning administrator, she doesn't have anything to work with. So if somebody comes in and asks her a question, all she can do is just show where somebody drew crayons back in 1984.
Well, one of the comments that the Berkeley group made is pointed out the advantage of not having things defined like that, so that we can take things on a case-by-case basis.
But that's happenstance and personality-driven zoning, and we've got to get away from it.
Well, I do not disagree.
You like personality-driven zoning?
I don't understand what you mean by fair.
So
I don't know why you have a problem with that, because
I just said I didn't. So
when you have a planning commission meeting and somebody starts talking about how the people's children play basketball, that has nothing to do with our land use decision. But that's the kind of stuff that I've been listening to for the last couple of years. We've got to get away from that and have some sort of idea where we can steer stuff. That's planning and zoning.
We need a plan in place so that we have a current, statutorily correct plan in place now. Then we need to start working immediately.
But you're not going to do that. You're not going to. Historically, that has not happened. And what's going to make you do it any different in the future?
Well, I disagree. Frankly, I have been working on this plan a lot, and I have written other things here that I have as comments to answer some of these questions right now about affordable housing and some of the language that we could insert that would satisfy some of these
So
issues.
you've got that with the planning commission.
I have this in my own personal work, which I brought. If anybody wants to see it, I'm happy to hand it out.
That's not part of the plan document that's going forward, it's being presented to the public.
It's being worked on, and it could be added to it,
But not if you're the only one that has it.
Well, I've just finished it. I'd be happy to let you see it.
I don't know why you haven't been sharing it with me to start with.
I just finished it. I just told you.
Well, see, that's the problem. It's not in here. That's what we're harping about here.
I know.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get a point across here.
I think you made your point. Let's go.
No, I don't think I have made a point because the gentleman is wanting to argue about it. So that means somebody hasn't understood my point, sir. We don't have a land use plan for the future. We haven't covered anything about several of these other items. I don't know why, it was just brought forward tonight, but I don't know why we haven't discussed perhaps a task force. It seemed to work with other projects we had. Why wouldn't it work with this?
I think that's the way you handled things in Gloucester, Mr. Curry. Didn't you have a committee that focused solely on the comprehensive plan?
It was, yes, we had an outside committee, outside of many citizens, and but staff did the work. The committee, was there to drive the vision. The staff did the work.
I remember when our zoning ordinance, the one that we finally adopted in 1986, I wasn't on the board, but I remember the planning commission had a subcommittee that worked on that. And that's how we got it done.
Yeah, well, that was general. Here's a possible potential problem with the task force. And with individuals, within the county. It's one thing if an outside person does it, but if individuals within the county does it, you are creating indirectly wealth for certain individuals. I mean, if you pick, say, for example, an area that an individual owns for intense development, you're adding to that guy's net worth substantially. And so you have private citizens and individuals in the county that are making those decisions, possibly, talking about personality, possibly for their buddies or something like that. That's a danger. That's a true danger. I'm just throwing that out there.
I would say that that's also true for every decision that the planning commission makes. They could be creating wealth for people. In some instances, our board could be creating wealth for people. I'm not saying that we just let anybody join. I'm saying we take applications and choose whom we would like to work on it.
I think it would delay the whole process. If we're going to do something like that, even though I'm opposed to hiring outside help, I would prefer that. And that'll get done lickety-split.
Well, what's wrong with having these public hearings, about the plan that we have now, and then with the strategic task force or blue ribbon panel concept, after the first of the year? That'll put some kind of a placeholder comprehensive plan in place that we haven't, take care of doing the update, the 5-year update, and then immediately start working on doing the strategic and the updating, with new minds and the new board, going forward in 2020. And as Mr. Parrish said, maybe that small pause in between allows you to focus on the May amendments, under a comprehensive plan that the public has been able to comment on through hearings, and then move on to that blue ribbon panel. I mean, it sounds like we can, instead of or, let's just do and do both.
The longer we delay, which means we delay these zoning tweaks, the bigger trouble we could be in the near future. So that's the reason I'm a proponent of going ahead and having a public hearing, I think no later than December, and that'll move us along expeditiously. And then we can decide, okay, do we need to have a task force, or gonna hire outside help? Are we gonna realize that we're almost there, we don't need hardly any changes? I mean, we won't know until we do it.
I would also add, as the board's representative on the planning commission, that as soon as our last draft had gone on to the Berkeley group, I urged the planning commission to go ahead and take up items that needed to be worked on, like the May amendments and the subdivision ordinances, and go ahead and start working on those while we had a pause with the comprehensive plan. And they were reluctant to do so until the comprehensive plan was completed.
So, first of all, I feel certain need to apologize. It's hard. It takes a lot to not get defensive in this context, so I apologize if that's part of what's coming through. But I do want to make a couple of observations. First of all, I think clarity about future land use plan. I think there's some garbled messages here. We have, as Mr. Curry put it, a future land use plan. It's in narrative form. What we don't have is future land use maps. And that is in large part because what's been implied but not said by anybody other than me, I don't think, is that we don't have any high growth areas. We are not identifying areas where we intend to change the current zoning. And therefore, the issue of future land use is sort of tied up in the issue of our current zoning map. But I think to talk about this in some of the terms that have been used, that we don't have a future land use plan, it's not accurate. I also want to say that with respect to public input and the opportunities for volunteers, there's a few things that I've observed in having been working on this now for, I can't even count all the years. The question came up earlier about what we did in 2016. Well, I think we did this not only in 2016, but we've done it multiple times. Almost no one showed up at any of those meetings. The only people who showed up are the people who show up at every one of our planning commission meetings. You know, 3 or 4 of them who are here tonight, they're at every meeting, and I think we kind of know where they're coming from at this point. So the other thing that happens is 2 things that sort of create the challenge for us to wrap this up. And, I'll accept whatever responsibility I have to, I'm sure there's a lot of views about, how we've led through this. But I can tell you it's not without lack of concern or effort that, our progress is where it is. But I'll also observe that there's a cycle, and, we went through it. I mean, there are very few of us. Mr. Henry is not here tonight, and I think he and I are among the few who've been sort of trying to gut this out and make it through this review cycle. Each year we get turnover from our BZA and supervisor reps, potential for additional representatives on the commission. It's a great thing, it's a great process, but it creates a natural cycle, and it becomes a bit of a trap to progress. The other thing that I've observed is very easy to find people with opinions and criticisms. It's a lot harder to find people with time and objectivity and interest in doing the grunt work that is actually required to work through this. We find whenever we get close that people come out of the woodwork and they talk about all kinds of things that, maybe we've addressed, maybe we haven't, but the reality is they haven't paid much attention to what we've done, so they don't really know if we've addressed it or not. They're just concerned about it, and they'll bring it up, and that's great. That's certainly the public prerogative, but to somehow think because there are people with opinions who show up, as these things come close to a close, is indication that we've got, that doesn't represent, I don't think, the same kind of commitment and focus that this commission has put into doing this over the past several years. And I will also note, yes, we all have the potential. It's a small community. we all sort of have relationships with people who come in. I would never accept the notion that we have personality-based zoning. I will accept, however, that we that everybody has a personal connection to these things in a very clear way. Many people who come before us have very clear agendas, either because of what's happening right next to them or what their business interest is. And of course that is true for those of us on the commission at times, but we have an appointed role. We've been vetted. We presumably, we're in. We have a certain level of public trust that comes with the appointment to this commission. I know I take that very seriously, and I try very hard to rely on my own experience and surroundings to form my opinions, but to bring the public, what I consider to be the public interest, to bear in all these decisions. And I think when you start seeking volunteers who have a lot to say in the form of what's wrong with what we've done, but haven't yet really exposed, what they think should be different. I think that's a risk that you take on. I was really hoping tonight that we would get some clear guidance from the supervisors in terms of which way to go. I would like to request again, perhaps some more clarity in that direction. I think the position of two of the supervisors seems pretty clear to me. The position of three supervisors is pretty clear to me, and they're not necessarily aligned. As we try to navigate and decide, and I get ready to go back into our next meeting and try to actually come up with an agenda and some activities to make progress, it would sure be helpful to get some more clarity from those of you who haven't been particularly clear on what your intentions would be. Thank you.
As a part of the process, I feel that things are much better than they seem. And I think one has to look at the history of the government in this county. And we have gone from a long-serving county administrator into a kind of very turbulent time, and that the way of doing business has changed, the people have changed, and I think that there has been a very, I thought, good and concerted effort by the Planning Commission to do its job, but that it took the coming of a person like Mr. Curry, who I think has been very effective and helpful for the county government generally. And in this particular situation with the comprehensive plan, put his shoulder behind the wheel and pushed hard and got a great number of things done that weren't getting done. And I think that the future is brighter than it looks, given the slow pace of things for a while. And I think that should be identified and understood, and that progress is possible and has been possible. And it is, I think we've been through a bad patch and we're through it.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask Mr. Coffey a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Coffey, on your letter to the to Mr. Curry, September 16th, page 3, we talk about 4 minor elements that are required by state code that can be met with simple insertions, these 4 bullet points here. So are you saying that our plan doesn't meet code until we put these in here or something to that effect?
From a technical standpoint, yes.
From a technical standpoint.
They're all, I mean, staff can do the first 2 bullets, the PDC handle very little effort in terms of demographic analysis and whatnot, and address the latter 2.
Let me interject real quickly. The 3rd bullet being affordable housing. The regional commission, PDC, is embarking on a housing study for the region, and it will include local data, but we won't have that probably for a year. So not to steal your time on the agenda, Supervisor Lizinski, if you, as a group, could identify things that you believe are critically time sensitive, need to get into plan now, and then these other items that can trail along and be added to the document later. A future land use plan map can be added to the document most any time, and the plan modified to suit that, kind of move from the narrative to the map. Affordable housing study can be completed by the regional commission and then incorporated into the plan at a later time, perhaps even as an appendix, and then referenced into the what does it mean for us? And do we need to do anything with our zoning or subdivision to help facilitate affordable housing? So if there are things that the group thinks are critical short-term, cell phone towers, what are they? And provide the planning commission with direction to get them in the plan, and you don't want to see the plan without them. And then are the things that can follow up in the years that come after that. Sorry.
And if I could, while you're asking the questions, the questions that haven't been asked quickly, I think that "and" is the correct answer. I think that if I were to advise you as a political neutral party who doesn't know any of you, I would let the planning commission proceed with the public hearing. See what the public has to say at that public hearing. Plan on making the medium and longer term amendments to the plan. Just agree to do that. You've got zoning and subdivision matters that have to be focused on. I think the best thing that you could do as a board of supervisors is put a consulting budget into your budget for the next 4 to 5 years at whatever amount you feel is affordable or appropriate. $30,000, $50,000, whatever. These things take hundreds of thousands of dollars as a total, but they can be done for less than that. We do that all the time. I think meeting with the planning district commission and saying, what can you do for us with what we pay you annually versus what would we need to pay additionally? It's still going to be more cost effective than a consultant, even though there are cost effective consultants that can also help. We as a consultant firm can partner with a Blue Ribbon Task Force. We can partner with the PDC, but it does take money and it takes time. You can get outside agency review of the more sensitive, technically complex applications like cell tower. If that's a concern, and an outside agency would help you with that land use evaluation, the applicants probably sit up a little bit straighter and tighter. There are ways to achieve everything that y'all are talking about. The tools that I've recommended can protect the things that are valued in this county, not open the doors to them. If you don't have a clear zoning map, how in the world do you know whether you have a spot zoning is? How do you evaluate an application? We want the future land use map to directly reinforce your zoning. Perfect. It doesn't have to open the door to allow for your zoning in other areas. It's what you want it to be. These are just tools in the toolbox. And we can help you develop them. Others can help you develop them. Planning district can help you develop them. You can do it all, literally. And you can do it in an affordable way over fiscal years. But if you save $50,000 a year for the next 5 years to do a complete comp plan rewrite in a couple of years, some amendments more near term, zoning ordinance and subdivision more near term, outside assistance for the more sensitive and politically hot land use topics that need to be fully evaluated so that a proper decision can be made, whether they're approved or denied. All of that can be done, but it does take commitment politically, it does take fiscal commitment. I think that in search of the perfect, nothing gets done. And I think you're close enough to good enough that you should move that forward while not sitting on your laurels, getting busy, and getting down to the matters at hand. You know, one of the things that I do when I teach for Dr. Chandler is remind the Planning Commission that you serve at the pleasure of the Board of Supervisors. You're advisory. And you're there to do a job. And if they ask you to do a job, you need to do the job. And I think you've done the job. And so supervisors, if they've done the job and they've done it well enough, move that forward, and then the decision will be in your court, and you can prove it, deny it, or send it back to try again.
Is there
Those are
any,
my 2 cents.
is there anything on page 3 that would need to be done for you would,
You know, there is
can
nothing
those be
here
done later?
that's gonna.
Those are requirements.
They're
I
required.
understand bullet point 3 with affordable housing, there's something in the works there that can get added, we're working toward that.
The most important bullet is the procedure through which citizens and property owners can apply for changes and amendments to the plan. That, in my opinion, that's what's important. Whether you have the 5-year review or not, state code mandates that you have to do.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? It's hard to hear back there.
The most important bullet is the procedure for changing or amending the comp plan. So an applicant can actually apply to amend it like you apply for a rezoning. And that's something that can be put into the plan very easily. That affordable housing, you know, it's there technically, you can check the box. You could make that amendment later, absolutely. Same thing with growth scenarios and future land use. I don't think there's anything here that would stop you from moving it forward if you wanted to move it forward. The whole Dr. Chandler quote versus Dr. Chandler quote, there's no law. If you go to court and you're out of compliance with it, you're going to get your butt kicked. You're going to lose. So there's no law, but legally,
Thank you for explaining that.
you want these things to be aligned. And there are ways to do it, and cost-effective ways to do it.
So what do y'all say we add this point 2 to this plan? And then go ahead and advertise for public.
So they just make sure everybody's clear with the process is laid out in board document tonight. And the planning commission must hold a public hearing, and then they will recommend it to the board, or they can amend and recommend to the board. So when the planning commission holds their public hearing and they hear again from the public, we've heard from many public, but if we have a public hearing and 200 people show up, and they are driving at a particular point, that might be a cue to the planning commission that certain things must be added before they push it up to the board. And then the board will then hold a public hearing, and you can approve it, as Darren said, amend and approve it, or reject it and kick it back. And so if there are some minor things that come up at that public hearing, the board could amend the plan before that final approval. Or if it was big, you would say, you know, even though the public had 2 kicks at this can, the second kick was louder because, you know, people don't go to the planning commission anyway, push it back to the planning commission and force it to go through.
So you're saying it's really not that necessary to add this bullet?
The first 2 bullets are simple to add.
Right.
You need a motion.
Fine. No, I think the planning commission just needs, and I specifically was hoping there wouldn't be decisions today, because we didn't suggest to the public that there would be, but that's your prerogative. But I think the planning commission needs to know, you know, the thoughts of the board relative to these things, so that they know how to move forward.
If I may, just on this point about the bullets, under any scenario that we proceed, Mr. Kohler pointed out that we there are ways that we could address some of these things to make them better. I don't know that they're going to satisfy everybody. I think bullets 1 and 2 are simple. Pretty sure we can get those. 3 and 4, we can look at that language and proceed. To me, there's still the fundamental question of whether that's the tack you want us to take, which is to head in the direction of getting this wrapped up in some fashion, that we can have one that has a 2019 or 2020 date on it, despite what we may also say and commit to with respect to going forward? Or do we want to sort of reset in some way? That's the level of guidance that as the chairman of the planning commission, I would really like to see going forward. We can handle some additional wordsmithing around these budgets. I have no question that we can address the first 2, and I have fair confidence that we could do a little bit more than is in the draft now on 3 and 4. I would remind folks that we got this response from the Berkeley group, and the plan all along was to have that feedback inform this discussion so that we could calibrate with our leadership, the supervisors, as to the direction we want to go. I think I speak for all of us, have no intention of putting forward something that, doesn't satisfy as many of you as possible. Whether that's start over or, try to get these last 4 bullets. I hope nothing that I've said reflects otherwise. I do feel a certain drive to wrap up what I've been working on for this long, but we definitely serve at your pleasure, and that's why I wish I could be looking for a clear signal from 5 of you, but I'd really at least like to have a clear signal from at least 3 of you. Thank you.
I guess nobody really cares what I've been saying.
So are you, back to my question, does the chairman of the planning commission, sounds like he's requesting some kind of a consensus or some kind of a...
Let me be clear. I would have loved to have seen that. I didn't necessarily expect that, but we will have another meeting. We will go back to our mandate to try to move this forward. The more clarity you can give us as to where we align, I think the better.
I wouldn't want to move forward unless I had something on record as far as how people feel. Otherwise, it can be misconstrued in the future as to who thought what and who supported which direction.
I think we really need to address the entirety of the budget. You've got page 4 and 5, you focused on page 3.
Mm-hmm.
State code requirements. I think these other recommendations are equally as important. Maybe they're not absolutely required by the code, but the bottom of page 4, the drafted plan occasionally uses oblique statements that could be clarified to the reader. We don't say why we don't have a working communication system. And that's pretty simple to address that. We don't have any towers in the town with any radio or paging equipment on. We're trying to take steps to fix that, but I think that needs to be addressed. Very, very simple things that should be in there, we ought to be doing.
The discussion of density at the end, I think, is also something that we want to address in this round. It seems like very basic.
I think that is, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, we've hired somebody to give us advice, and as I understand it, the advice is to proceed with the public hearing with what we have. Is that not correct?
I don't think he's advising us, sir. He said that we could do that. That's what I heard. That doesn't mean that that's what we should do.
Well, we hired this company.
At the end of the day, it's the supervisor who directs it, not the consultant
Right.
who decides to advise.
Well, if you go to a doctor or a lawyer and you pay for advice, you probably don't tend to take it.
It comes down to a matter of preference. There is nothing that is so broke it's going to get anybody in trouble with the procedure as is and end up getting back. But if the planning commission forwards a product that is deemed not meeting the level of expectation of the board of supervisors, then it's going to be
a waste of process and a waste of effort. You don't want to drag people out for a public hearing, regardless of what they have to say. But at the end of the day, it's dead on arrival with the supervisors because the comments that were ignored at this meeting. So whether I agree with the comments or not, whether I think some things could be done later or not, they're saying they think it should be done sooner, I'll do it sooner.
I'm just going to say I do agree with the fact that this is a living document and it can be changed monthly if so desired with the public hearing to have any changes as we go along.
I want to point out also in the fact that it's a living document that when I was put on the planning commission, I went to quite some trouble to go through the statistics and see where all the holes and problems areas were and insist that those be updated before we went forward. Because to me, the comp plan is sort of like the scientific method. That's where we should be drawing our analysis from. And I do appreciate very much the time and energy that staff went to update all of that information. And I don't believe that the commission did the necessary resulting work of drawing conclusions and working them into the rest of the document. That being said, if we don't get this wrapped up soon, we're going to have to do a whole other batch of statistics. We've got to get it done by June. So I don't want to be, looking down at, having to re-update everything and be caught in this cycle that you talk about. And, Mr. Light, that's why I think that we need to have a specific body dedicated to the task so that we don't age out of the process again. That's what I'm afraid of.
So the memo put forward by the Berkeley Group is a good roadmap, and the 4 state code bullets and then the other items, I think, are all important. You've heard from citizens on a few other things, but perhaps a way to move this forward is if the board were to ask the planning commission, if majority of the board is of mind to say the current plan as amended to incorporate these bullets would likely be acceptable at the public hearing. And if there are bullets on this report that can't be met, we want to know why. And we want to know when you think you can meet them. And so the board could ask the planning commission to say, here's your directive. You tell us what's incorporated now, and then if you can't incorporate it now, why, and when are you going to incorporate it? Maybe that's a path forward.
Mr. Perry, I hate to say it, but I think what you just said is extremely important, and unfortunately 2 of the 5 supervisors were not here to hear it. So would you please...
They're probably watching baseball.
Would you please plan, perhaps we could use a 5-minute break, but I think what you just said is really important. It's kind of driving what I was getting at, but I really think it's important that Mr. Welch and Mr. Perry share that as well.
The vice chairs.
So Nationals are up on 1.
Okay, thank you. We have an update.
The vice chair is presiding at the moment. So.
And also thank you for using a photo from Sperryville.
I wondered about the daggone photo.
Got that right, buddy.
We've gotten burned by Google a couple times.
While we're sort of perhaps in a state, I don't know where exactly we are, but on this issue of the density, I had a kind of a more technical question about that. To me, one of the reasons that we haven't gone in that direction is because, with the exception of Sperryville and Washington, everybody's on well and sewer, and their own private well and septic, and that tends to be what drives the density condition rather than a particular lot size because we don't have those public services. Can you comment on whether that changes your view at all on how to deal with the density specification question?
Sure.
What's the density, how many units per acre in ag? 1 per 25? Okay, so that's what your zoning says, so why don't your comp plan say very low density is 1 over 25? You know, it correlates and backs up that zoning. Yeah. One of the things that I've tried to hone over the years is listening.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've heard is there's a little bit of a fear that if you bring definition to something. And I'm assuming Mr. Gordon said, well, if you don't define it, then that gives you more discretion. I disagree with that statement. I think things need to be as clear as possible. And as good as Todd was in his analysis, and as good as he is in what he does as a planning consultant, he was never in the trenches with zoning like I was. So the clearer you can be in what you want, and how you define it, the better off you're going to be, and the more you can protect what you value. So I would say that if in Sperryville you've got houses on quarter-acre lots, and that's medium density, then that's how you define it. In the ag area, it's 1 every 25 lots, and that's how you define it.
But if I could, I hate to interrupt you, but that's the problem. That's what's destroying our farmland, is people see the 1 per 25 density as one house on 25 acres. When in fact the zoning ordinance says that the minimum lot size in ag is 2 acres. So unless we actually define that, you're gonna have a bunch of people seeing 1 per 25 thinking you gotta have a 25 acre lot to build on. And that's what people subdivide that. And that has destroyed our agricultural base.
So that's the kind of clarity that is needed, and that's why.
That's the kind of clarity that needs to be there, because you've got people that get that so confused. And every time I meet somebody from another part of the state, they say, oh, y'all gotta have 25 acres to build on. I say no. And it's generally at a restaurant or something, I'll take a napkin and draw it out for them and say instead of 4 times 25 out of a 100-acre farm, you've got the potential, depending on topography, but you can cut off 25, or you could do 3 2-acre and reserve the rest of the property at 96 acres to continue farming. But nobody seems to get that. And unless we spell that type of actual breakdown and what we're trying to do here, you're going to continue to destroy farmland in this country.
And it's important that you're clear in the comp plan, in terms of the land use designation, and how you define that. And then it's also important that you're clear about the zoning ordinance. It sounds like it's not tremendously clear.
No,
They know how to
understand
apply
that,
it.
but a lot of people
Right.
don't.
And we run into that a lot. It's like we run the planning department in Essex County. We've got the same thing. We've got, well, it says this, but it says this. And it's your development rights are this. The minimum lot size is this. They're not the same thing. And so we're going to rewrite their ordinance, and it's going to be clear once we're done it, so that misconception goes away. So clarity is your friend.
And I take your point that it's a topic for the ordinance that I look forward to getting to. I'm sorry I know I took us a little bit down this hole, but I think our supervisor colleagues are back. I was hoping
I would say
they could repeat.
all dialogue is good dialogue when you're together talking about these things. You're learning from each other what is or isn't important, or what should or shouldn't be point of focus. And so I'll reiterate what I said just a moment ago. A couple board members were out of the room, and they may have their legs. Perhaps a path forward is to ask the Planning Commission to use the Berkeley group letter bullets, both state requirements and the other suggestions, as a guide to what should be added to the comprehensive plan. When it's added to the comprehensive plan would be a response back from the Planning Commission. As they review each bullet in detail, they can incorporate as many of those items into the plan that will be subject to public hearing very shortly. And anything that they feel they can incorporate into the comprehensive plan shortly, they would provide a response back to the board why they can incorporate it to the comprehensive plan shortly, and when they think they will be able to do it, and perhaps what tools they need to make that happen. A path forward.
Can the Planning Commission do that?
yes. I think that would be a reasonable path forward.
Address what you can out of all of this, all these bullets, and then give us some sort of explanation as to what you need, time-wise or tool-wise, to complete the rest of these.
I think that's a reasonable request, certainly, and I would imagine that would be my personal expectation has always been when we get to the hearing stage. We've done a little bit of this already. I understand that people have valid criticisms about what's in the, I think it's chapter 7 or 8, whichever it is, that we talk about the path forward. That we do try to make some clear commitments there about some of these items. We've got some things in there sure can be improved upon. It's probably where some of these very specific items about process should be added. So I don't have any problem with that. I guess I would ask Mr. Curry, I know I'm wondering, and I suspect some of the others of us are wondering if they haven't already worked through it. I know I have not. What, given the various sequence of events that you just articulated a few minutes ago about the various hearings and the response, what is the, and the notification and some of those things, what is the, what are some of the, what's the minimum time frame that you think we would need for that? It strikes me that I'm trying to figure out if there is a path toward getting this done in this current year or not, just given what that would entail. So that is,
I would find
yes, is the
it
answer.
highly unlikely that this will be stamped final in 2019. You need 2 weeks of advertising before each public hearing, and then you have to work into your cycle for your weekly paper, and then you have to digest the information that comes in from the public hearing before the recommendation is made by the Planning Commission, which may include amendments. I would strongly, predict that it will be 2020 before the board holds their public hearing, let alone adopt it. I mean, there just aren't enough days left. But there's nothing magical about December 31st, other than you'll have 2 other possible.
Well,
whoever knows how the board members will be involved. Who's
Sure.
been engaged along anyway.
Well, and I know I was given a fairly simple question. I'll answer the question, yes, I think that is a reasonable path forward. I guess to the broader point, though, by the time we're finished, we're looking at probably a different configuration than what we're meeting here tonight, no matter what we do. So I think that's worth having people think about as we do try to decide how to path forward. That's all.
I'd just say that I think that personality shouldn't play into it on the board. That's the reason that we brought the Hartley Group in as consultants into the situation, so that we could have an analysis, and you should work to the analysis, not to the personalities.
I'm sorry if I implied in any way that I meant personalities. I certainly didn't need to. Votes and opinions, though, are what drive us forward, and that's really more where I was coming from.
I think if you have a reasonable plan forward, I think whoever sits on the board, January 1 will have a perspective of that process.
I agree, and I appreciate that.
Not hearing other board members object vociferously, maybe a plan. And you could target a December public hearing for the Planning Commission. I think you might be able to have time to do that if you had extra meetings.
When's our next meeting? I'm sorry, when's our next meeting?
Someone have the date of our next?
November 20th.
I'll take that. Because you won't have a December public hearing.
Yeah, but our cell phone towers on the agenda that
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's quite clear that our practice through much of the summer and fall of having dedicated work sessions on the comprehensive plan is sort of necessary. It's been suggested tonight. I obviously accept that because that's what we've been doing until we reach the point of seeking feedback, and we have to get back to that. I think it's essential that we do it.
Procedurally, when you're done with your discussion, the planning commission, Mr. Chair, you'll adjourn, and then Mr. Chairman Welch will adjourn after you, and we'll both be adjourned, so whenever you're ready to do that.
I'll make a motion.
All right. Heard motion and a second that we adjourn the working session of the planning commission. Any further discussion of that? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
The supervisor, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, do I have a second? Second. Motion made and second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Who's my second? Chris?
Chris.